can they communicate truth? Can they defend their view with scripture? Your children in another 10, 20 years are going to be parents themselves. They're going to own businesses. They're going to be working jobs out in the world, or they're going to own their own, whatever it is. The point of education is to raise up a godly generation that can think critically, can apply what they know to the creation around them and make it better and make the lives of people better, bring them to Yeshua, make him the light. How are we going to do that if we don't challenge them and push their buttons in all of these ways? So I feel, again, like discussion, it rules. And if we don't get through a textbook, but I taught my children to think, well, they can look up sound waves later when they need it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hebrews and Shebrews, welcome to the Life Podcast. Today we are talking with Anne and Kraig Elliot of homeschoolingtorah.com. And they put together a curriculum for homeschoolers who are Torah observant, as their own 7 children are. So we get into what does a homeschooling day look like from their perspective, and also from feedback that they've gotten from their clients, and how to keep your kids from being weird if they're homeschooled. I was homeschooled. You'll have to decide whether I'm weird or not. The goal of education, age by age. And also we get into what to do if you don't feel equipped to teach. I personally think this subject is very important for the Torah community because so many people homeschool. And it's also near and dear to my heart because I was homeschooled and I want to, help foster a strong homeschooling community out there. Also, someone told me that we have never talked about the Christmas question being a sponsor. We made it along with 119 Ministries, who produced it and did so much to make it come to life, funded it, and helped lend their team to make it beautiful, vet it. And so this episode is sponsored by that documentary. What that documentary is all about is it a sin to celebrate Christmas? And we talk to historians, and we talk to researchers, and we talk the best of the best, really. I mean, we're talking to the people who are writing all of the white papers that you see. All of these famous pro-Christmas Christians. And then we also talk to people who think that you shouldn't be celebrating the holiday. But it's mostly professors that we're talking to. And then we talk to some Torah observant people who give their perspective as well. But it's a heavy history documentary about, is it a sin to celebrate Christmas? If that sounds like something you're interested in watching, go to thewaydoc.com and check it out. Anne and Kraig, welcome to the Life Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yay!
Thank you.
It's good to be here.
I'm excited to talk to Anne. I usually just see you at the Torah Sisters retreat. It's like our annual hangout. Yes. But now I get to ask you all my burning homeschool questions.
Dear.
So I'm super psyched about it.
She has you cornered now.
I need more coffee.
Captive audience.
Yeah.
You're going to need it.
So maybe before we get to the homeschool questions, would you please tell us how you guys came into the Torah, the understanding that the Torah, the law, is relevant to our lives today?
How long do you have?
We have as long as you want.
We'll try and be short and sweet, but that usually doesn't happen. So it all started with Anne and a book that she had wrote way back in 1999, 2000.
No, I didn't get published till 2005.
Okay, 2005.
So.
And an individual who had read the book had felt after reading it that my wife was Torah observant, even though we had no clue about Torah. And so she was asked to lead a women's conference at our church that we were at the time. And the woman flew all the way from Tennessee out to Iowa, where we lived, to go to the conference.
Without telling us.
Yeah, setting it up with a friend of ours, the assistant pastor's wife. And showed up at the conference, and we had never met this person before. she kind of knew Anne from an online forum. This was pre-blogs and stuff like
old.
that.
It's Yahoo group time.
Yeah, old stuff. And so she showed up at the conference and said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so." And my wife's mouth dropped to the ground and said, "You are?"
I already knew she was a little strange, did things like Sabbath and didn't eat pork and just some strange things. Thought she was odd.
Well, she was really outspoken about this kind of Torah stuff on the forum, and everybody kind of just didn't listen to her. Knew she was kind of weird.
To her.
Yes, you were. So feel free to interrupt at any time.
Well, what was the book? What was the book about? Why did she think you were Torah observant?
Oh, my book was called Juggling Life's Responsibilities. It's out of print now because the publisher doesn't really care for our theology now. But the book, it just started with the basis that the Bible is supposed to be our foundation for everything. And I quoted Psalm 119 quite a bit in that chapter. And so the woman said, "Well, you think Psalm 119 applies to us today, right?" I'm like, "Yes." "Oh, cool. You're Torah observant." I'm like, "No." Israel and the church are distinct. Hello.
So it's supposed to be about, it's a book for women to prioritize their life and all the different, what should be your top priority, second priority, things like this. And so
God is first, right?
Yeah. And so it kind of went from that progress through the chapters, goes through what's number one, of course, would be God and the Word of God, and then your husband, your family, so on and so forth. And so in that, of course, she's quoting a great deal of scripture, especially from the Old Testament.
Yeah, I did.
And
because good principles there, right?
Yes.
Anyway, so she came to the conference. After the conference, again, I was trying to be polite to her. I went over to her Airbnb and we stayed up till about 1 a.m. And I told her she had lost her salvation because she was trusting in works. And she informed me that, well, all of the things about Torah that I had never heard. And then I got really sick that summer and spent a lot of time out in the backyard on a blanket while my kids were playing. And I was too sick to really do much else. And I had Strong's Concordances and a bunch of Kraig's books and a bunch of spiral notebooks and my Bible. And you were a football coach, and he'd come home from work at night and I'd say, "Honey, what do you think about this verse?" Because I was starting to get a little convinced.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, "Oh, honey. Oh, honey."
So I always tell people this, but when we were young, we were introduced to some people parenting wise that we went through their parenting courses, and their parenting courses were very heavy in the use of the books of the Old Testament and being able to share how to have proper parenting principles. And that we kind of look back and we're like, why is it that we can use this for all these? We can use the Old Testament for all these different things, but it's done away with and everything else. And it was kind of this: you take what you want, but you don't have to take what you don't want kind of mentality. And that probably in the back of our minds started things, and then this was like a second step in our being open, our eyes being open to doing Torah.
And if she's watching this today, I'm really thankful that she flew out there.
Yes.
Because that was a huge step of faith. She said that she felt like the Ruach was telling her to go see us. And I'm like, "What's a Ruach?" Mm-hmm. I remember. But I'm really thankful. I know you are.
Yeah.
And it took us a long time, several years, to work through all of our theology.
Well, I was, at the time, I was a counselor in a high school and a football coach. And so, the idea of taking off Friday night and Saturday was impossible because that's game night, the coaches' meetings and players' meetings and all these kind of things like that.
And never mind garage sales. How are we supposed to live if we can't go to garage sales? I remember having that discussion.
So when she started on this, she asked me the first, would you mind if we rested on Sabbath? I'm like, it's fine with me. But I've got to go do these things because, I was under contract and stuff like that. And that she was sharing with me whenever we had opportunities to talk about it. And I also told her one time I came in and I saw her on a website that had a Jewish sounding name. It's called Eliad.com, and which is not a Jewish website, but it's a Torah keeping website. And I said, we're not going to go look at Judaism to see about this stuff. If we're gonna do this, it's going to be strictly from the Bible, and we're going to learn it on our own. And she was very gracious with that, and didn't do that anymore. And we were just studying the Word of God. So she was really seeing it and develop and starting on this stuff. And we were kind of poor as church mice. We had, at that point in time, we had 6 kids, and we were living on my salary, pretty much alone at that time. And one thing we did is in the local town, they had kind of a more of a hometown kind of grocery store they actually butchered their own meat and stuff like that. And they had a sale on a half a pig. And we went out and saved up our money and bought a half a pig so we could get it really cheap. And I don't know how long it was before you said anything to me. I don't know when we bought that, but anyhow, so the sometime after that, I didn't know about it. She told me that when she was seeing this. 2007 that Yom Teruah, the deed. So she threw away the entire thing in a black garbage bag, so he wouldn't know. I didn't tell him. It was a while after she told me, so I didn't know. And he never asked for any pork. I said, Father, if he asks for pork, I'll go to the store and get some real quick and make it. But he never, ever asked. Yeah. It's like he forgot it was in the freezer. And I didn't remind him. So don't do this. Yeah, probably not the best thing to do, but he worked through it. So not long after, so I started that year, and during football season, I said, okay, I'll go through and I'll do what I need to do for school, for football and stuff, and then I'll come home and rest, and I won't come home and mow the lawn or do things like this. So we started doing that, and during that time, Yah was really looking at my life and pointing me in a direction of going back into full-time ministry, which I had originally gone to Bible college to become a pastor. And both of our parents were missionary church planters in the United States all the time we were growing up. So I started putting out feelers and accepted a pastor in a small Baptist church in Minnesota. And we moved up there. I pastored there for 4 years, and that was my time to really be able to ingest all this stuff and study it down myself and really make it personal, because a lot of it was mostly her, because she had the time to study at that point in time, and I really didn't have that time to study it, to really internalize it myself. I got where she was coming, I agreed with it, but I hadn't really made it my own, and that was the time that I did that. And so we pastored for 4 years, and as I was learning, I started teaching and preaching it eventually it started putting us at odds with the people we were pastoring. We were pastoring in a town that was 10 miles outside of Austin, Minnesota, which I'd never heard of Austin, Minnesota before. But Austin, Minnesota is the headquarters for Hormel Foods. Spam Museum is there.
Oh my goodness!
As their crown joy, and that's actually when we moved there. We were in one of the tours for what the local area is like was going to the Spam Museum. This is after we were Torah keeping. We were trying in our own. Yes.
How soon after you became the pastor did you start believing this stuff? Was it like years?
Before. So we accepted the pastorate at the Baptist church already doing Torah. So we would rest on Shabbat, and then I'd go and pastor on Sunday.
Did they know right away that they were like, there's something fishy about this guy?
We told them.
We told them that we did this stuff, but I don't think it didn't really comprehend.
I don't think we comprehended.
Yes, fully.
We didn't.
Like, we were starting to do the feast days. We still did Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, we didn't know about Christmas. We didn't know it was.
Yeah, and it was while we were there. Like, that's a story. We I set up. I love Christmas. I love the decorations and stuff. It wasn't so much. It wasn't the whole Jesus is the reason for the season thing. And I say this to people. I didn't grow up with that kind of mentality. It was a time of family and friendship and pretty and just enjoying people. And everybody's off, and you're getting to spend time together. So it wasn't all this like gung ho Jesus stuff, really. And it's just kind of interesting coming from parents who were pastors and stuff like that.
It was a little more in my home growing up that way, but still.
So I love the decorating and things like this. And we had just put everything up, and I went home. I went to my office. My wife sent me Jim Staley's Truth or Tradition video, and I watched it in my office at church, and was really convicted. And I came home at lunch one day, and I was just looking at everything. I had like a seat that actually sat across the room from where the tree was. I was just looking at it, and I pondered that for about a half hour, and I was like, all right, we're taking everything down. And so we went through and just took everything down, put it out on the corner for someone to take away, and that was the end of Christmas that year. It was one of their...
Well, then you also went to church the next Sunday. Oh. They had a tree on the platform next to the pulpit, and you picked it up and marched it right down the aisle in front of everyone. I don't think...
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. You put it out in the thing, and certain women in the church were not happy with you.
So we kind of moved it from the front of the auditorium out to the back of the fellowship area, the entrance. So they weren't going to let me not put it up. But
I was like, my word, my husband, when he decides something, look out, world. I don't know if you feel that way, but that's how I was like, wow. Whew, okay.
What was the reaction then from the people?
Silent disapproval.
Well, basically, it was the pastor's responsibility to decorate for Christmas at this time, and I'm like, I don't mind. You can have it, but I'm not going to deal with it. If you guys want it, you feel free to put it up, which didn't go over very well, honestly. But I think they thought for some reason I was shirking all my responsibilities.
Your Christmas decorating responsibilities.
Yes, that's right.
Your Griswold responsibilities.
What are we paying you for?
Man.
So this story takes a while. It took us a long time to come into Torah. I would say 2006 was when our friend came and visited at that conference. And then when you took down the Christmas tree, that was 2010.
Okay.
And you were pastoring there until 2012. So it took us, we're slow. We had to go deep into everything that we believed, one thing at a time, and didn't have all the resources that are available now, or else we were unaware of them. And we just had to work through it very, very slowly. So I feel like we're the slowest of all Torah people.
Well, so we basically would learn like one feast at a year, basically, and implement that into our lives. That it was so, like the first one was Passover and unleavened bread, and then Shavuot, and then
I don't even think Shavuot was the next one. I think I don't know. It was
camping.
It took us years. Yeah.
Yeah. So by the time I was done with my pastorate, we were celebrating all the feasts. So it took 6 years to kind of implement all that in and kind of understand it and start doing things about it in that. But that's the other story. So we were stopped. Go ahead.
Did they jettison you then eventually? Were they like, get out?
Yeah, that is eventually what happened. And there was becoming some rumblings among some of the people. And in order to like not have issues or that were greater and maybe splitting or something like that, I decided to resign. So I resigned in the end of December, beginning of January of 2012, was it? Mm-hmm. And so that was the end of that. But when we started there, there was one more story that was kind of interesting, and I would like to share this. That the one, like I said, they took us to the Spam Museum to show us the town and all the best places and stuff in town. And so we're there, and as soon as you come in, this lady, people come up with trays of all these different flavors of Spam and say, "Here, try one of our flavors of Spam." And the guy like immediately grabs it and that's showing us around and eats it and stuff like that. And he's one of the trustees of the church, and he's like, "Come on, eat." So I like take one, and I'm like, do I not? I finally took a bite of it and ate it. I felt horrible about it. I was trying to decide, is it better to be compassionate in this instant or make a stand kind of idea? And I chose to be the compassionate one at that point in time. Probably would change my mind if I knew, now I wouldn't have done it. But the interesting thing, so we got there and we were there the whole week. And we went home on a Sunday evening because I had to go back to work on Monday. And halfway there, it dawned on us that it was Yom Kippur. So my last choice of eating pork happened on Yom Kippur.
Wow. Oh so my gosh.
Very convicted.
That was a very challenging moment. And I think we actually pulled off.
We didn't even realize it was Yom Kippur. Tells you how new we were.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't all pork. It was meat, too. Spiced pork and meat.
What's the meat?
Yeah, what is the meat?
That's a question mark.
So, I think we actually got off on the road and kind of repented right there. And when we realized it and kind of went on our way after that. But that was kind of a...
It's hard when before you've galvanized on one view or the other, when you're between thoughts, it's hard to be vigilant and be like, well, I'm sure, blah, blah, blah. I will defend this to the death, because you're just transitioning. Yes. In the interlineary period is difficult.
Yes, absolutely. And challenging to learn, especially today where you have, like, for instance, with food things, where you have all these additives and things like that are in foods that are very difficult to sometimes discover, especially if you don't know about them. In a lot of our foods and stuff today. So
that's true, too.
That is definitely a challenge as you learn.
So you came into the Torah, you got kicked out of your church that you were pastoring. What did you do for work? And were you already homeschooling at this point? Those questions.
We were already homeschooling, and I was looking for jobs. We had also started looking to start a graphic design and web design business and build websites for people based upon some skills we've been slowly learning. And we were trying to do that and get that going. I was trying to look for interviews back somehow in education. Didn't even get a single interview.
Yeah. One.
And that was, so after 4 months of not finding anything, all of our savings were gone. We had no money left, and we received notice that in 2 weeks we were going to be evicted from our where we were staying. And so that was pretty serious. So I'll let you take over.
Well, I mean, it was just a rough time. Everything we tried, nothing worked. Nothing. We're like, we know the Father wanted us to leave being a pastor, and we know that. We knew for sure that's what he wanted us to do. He had provided a home for us, but it was expensive. The rent was very high outside the Twin Cities. And we just knew that we were going to have to leave there too, but we didn't know where to go. And I might be a bit of a book hoarder. When we moved into that house, it was the middle of winter when we moved in, and we had 40 banana boxes of just books. And we carried them uphill in the snow. Yeah, it was just fun. So we knew we had a lot of stuff. So where are we going to go? Where are we going to, and at this point, we didn't have money at all. We were completely drained in every way. So how would we get a truck? How would we move out? Where would we go? What would we get security deposits with? What was this going to do? Before we left the pastorate, can I tell a little story?
Sure.
You had a Torah friend who would call you on the phone while you were still a pastor. I have a picture of him on the phone one day with this Torah friend, and the cat snuggled up with him, and he's on the phone. It's like a really priceless picture to me. But the guy said, someday you're going to have to take a stand. You're going to have to decide, are we doing Sabbath or are we doing Sunday? Which one is it? And we're like, no, we can do both. and he's like, well, it'll feel like jumping off a cliff, but you should just do it. Trust him. He'll take care of you. And we're like, you don't understand. But anyway, when we did it, I just kept remembering what he said. And we're like, well, we jumped. I don't know if he's going to catch us.
Trying to do both Saturday and Sunday is exhausting and almost nigh to impossible. I don't recommend it to people.
No. But yeah. So, and how sweet those couple months, even though we were very poor, and we couldn't find jobs, the stress of that was hard, but it was also really, really neat to finally be a family and be able to, just do Torah. And not have to live with a foot in both worlds all the time and just be Torah observant. It was awesome. In fact, that's when we wrote our Foundations of Torah curriculum. We would sit around the table as a family and novel idea, read the Torah. It was awesome. That was a really good year. But we were out of money. And so I was starting to look around the house at, okay, I'm going to have to get rid of everything because we can't get a truck. And this point we had 7 children. And so we've got just our vehicle. We had a van, right? Did we have a van at that point? And so you're not going to get much in that van with 7 kids. And so I'm looking at all my books. I'm like, oh, I love my books. And they're just going to have to go.
We were looking at basically just packing everybody in the car and leaving everything.
Yeah.
We had no way to sell it. We couldn't, they were going to kick us out and we had no way of carrying it anywhere and no money to buy a truck to move it to someplace. So we were calling up our parents and stuff and say, would it be possible to come live with you until we could find a job and, kind of get back at our feet, that kind of idea.
Yeah. And so, I was packing up the homeschooling curriculum and over the not 7 years, over all the years that we'd homeschooled with 7 children, and I had a preschooler all the way up through a 12th grader at this point.
Wow.
I had just done a lot of things to simplify life, to be able to teach all my kids together. And most of that was partly because I was sick a lot, and just practically speaking, it's not a very good idea to try to teach 7 Bible classes, 7 history classes, 7 math classes. I mean, no, I don't have that much energy. I just don't.
It doesn't work.
And on top of that, we had noticed that, for instance, in math, things cycle back around. You're teaching the same concepts over and over. They're just basically filling time in a classroom down at the public school. They need to fill up 180 school days times 13 years, if you count kindergarten. And I'm like, we're all doing fractions at all the levels. Why don't we just do it together? Things like that. So we had very much simplified our homeschooling down to do it together. I didn't have any money to buy curriculum that year for ourselves, but I'm like, I don't need to buy curriculum. Look at what we have. We could just do this together. And I remember Kraig was out at the dining room table because it was hot that day and there was a good ceiling fan right above him. And I walked out and plunked a bunch of books down on the table in front of him. I said, honey, I bet you we could make our own curriculum and it would be based on the Torah. And that would be so amazing.
Well, you said I thought I could, maybe we could sell this. I'm making it anyhow. Maybe we could sell it online and 10 people will buy something.
No, you said that. You said there's probably 10 people that would buy that. And I'm like,
well
10 times.
That would give us enough gas money to get to wherever we need to go.
10 is good. 10, there's hardly anybody in the world that does Torah, but because we felt that way. We felt very isolated. So he's like, fine, whatever. We were so down. We were down. Fine, if you think you can. So it was all the years of the father providing business training, website design training, all of that. We seriously sat down at the computer, and in about 2 weeks, we had put together Homeschooling Torah. And not all the years of curriculum, but 2 weeks.
We developed a website. We put it online. We got some membership stuff going and all of that.
I can stay a week ahead of all my customers. I know I can do this.
and we had 2 weeks online. Or did you have a
2
month?
weeks.
thought
I had 2 weeks. Yep. I
When
had
we
1
started.
week as a sample and one more week when they logged in.
And so
that's it.
for the next several years, we were just staying a week ahead basically the whole time we were doing this, and fake it till you make it, basically, kind of idea.
Long hours.
Yeah.
But the Father provided in the day we launched, because we did a whole cool product launch formula and
the refrigerator.
Oh yeah. On the refrigerator, we put a piece of paper about how many customers we would need to sign up to just
be able to
pay the bill on just our rent, so that we wouldn't be evicted. And by noon that first day, we opened at 7 a.m. that morning, and by noon we had not only that covered, but all of our utility bills covered, our groceries covered.
Wow.
That's
great job.
And our kids were all watching this because we're putting tally marks.
We're having them put the tally marks on. Our older ones.
The whole family was like, wow.
And so by the end of that day, we basically had been able to stay and pay our bills. And within the next month, we had caught up on any of our bills that we had back that we hadn't been able to pay. And we stayed there. And that very day, this is also cool. That morning, it opened at 7 a.m., the launch, and a woman emailed us and said, I've been praying for something like this. Yeah. I've been wondering for years or not years, but for a amount of time.
Long time.
And
you're
to
like,
find something
how?
like this.
We didn't even know this was going to exist 2 weeks ago. Obviously, the Father was working.
So it didn't come without any bumps and in the road, especially. We had a lot of issues.
Yeah, we didn't know what we were doing.
But yes, the provision of the Father definitely was amazing, and seeing how he was guiding us by faith and stuff was pretty awesome. And so our kids got to see firsthand his provision and our ability to stay there. And so that was the beginning of Homeschooling Torah, and we've pretty much lived on it ever since. This year was our 11th anniversary of our start, and we decided we were there at that place for
15 months total.
Yeah. And so that would have been, we were there almost another year after starting it. June of the next year. In January of that year, we decided we were going to go on the road full time in a bus.
Well, okay, so pause there.
Okay.
One of the things that we found out very quickly, because the Father, honestly, we started Homeschooling Torah to pay the bills. But very quickly, he started showing us that, first of all, the Torah community was a lot bigger than we ever imagined. We had no idea how many people were walking this walk, and all of them thinking they were isolated and didn't know anyone else. And then secondly, how very few people, we were privileged to have a Messianic congregation near us, 45 minutes, but most people had no one at all. But then as we got these customers and we could put them on a map, and you'd be like, wait a second, you're not alone. There's another customer 5 miles down the road from you, and they don't even know. They didn't know each other. And
this was before fellowship finders and stuff.
Yes, right.
So people didn't have that ability to go and find things and see who was near them.
No idea.
Like
and we're like, you know what? Both our parents were church planners. That was really where our heart was. And we're like, we should go on the road and we should get these people congregations. Maybe we could stay each place 2 months or something and help them get a congregation started and go do another one.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
Wait, before you go on with your story, we have some questions about Homeschooling Torah.
I do. Oh man, I have several questions. The first question was, Kraig, you were a football coach, counselor in a public school, and also were you teaching, or you were doing the counselor work?
I was full-time counselor, but I had taught for 3 years. I had been a high school administrator for 3 years, and I had counseled for 3.5 years.
So with that background, why are you homeschooling your kids? That was my burning question. Why aren't your kids going to the school, district where you're working?
I grew up in a very conservative public school system, and my parents, while missionaries, were also subtaught for most of the years that I was in school, and they had a great impact in the lives of people in my public school system. So much so, my dad died before my senior year of high school, and the school district paid for all of the funeral expenses for my dad's funeral for a sub teacher. So that tells you kind of the impact he had on people's lives and stuff there. And I saw that growing up. And I had initially gone to school to be a pastor, and then I had kind of gone into liked working with youth and stuff, and was thinking about being a youth pastor. And while I was in college, I had an opportunity through a friend to go and volunteer as a coach, coaching football, and I loved it. And I felt like, through all my experiences and stuff, was bringing me into the public school system. And I had a Christian who was a counselor at a public school who came in and talked at one of our classes. And I'm like, he's talking about how all the opportunities he has and how the next great mission field is the public school system. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. Long story short, we moved and all this different stuff. And I went from being a second semester senior down to a second semester sophomore, and had to take 2.5 more years of school. So I crammed 4 years of college into 7. And, but I graduated with my degree and got into the public school system only to realize it was not like what I grew up in. And the places I had opportunities to teach in and stuff were nothing like what my parents would have been like. And my school system had issues. It wasn't that bad.
Oh, I just said, what was different specifically?
The kids were a lot more disrespectful as a whole. The support between the administration and the staff wasn't there. It was all about being politically right. And if you weren't politically right and didn't do everything right with that, then I had a superintendent come and talk to me one time, and he's like, we're like circle the wagons, and if you're not inside the wagons when something goes wrong, then we're not going to come out and help you, kind of an idea.
What's the year here? What year?
I think it was 2004 that this was all happening at that point in time, and I was teaching then. Then I went out and I became a high school administrator out in Arizona on the Navajo reservation, and that was a great experience. And there was a lot more teamwork in that school. But then we hired a superintendent, and basically right after he was hired, he had me in his office and he says, there's going to be all these changes up in the high school. And the principal I was under, because I was like an assistant principal, it was called Dean of Students, but I basically handled all the discipline and stuff. The principal I was under was resigning, and we had a great relationship. He had backed me and backed him and things and stuff, so it really worked out well. But this new guy didn't like what we were doing, and said there's going to be all these changes. And I was kind of like, okay.
So changes like, for instance, you had
I instituted attendance policies that and made
actually required them to go to school.
Yeah, required consequences if they didn't go to school, and we're trying to cut down on drugs and stuff like this. And I actually didn't know anything about drugs when I took this job, really. And I learned very quickly about marijuana and methamphetamines and stuff like this, and dealing with the kids and like things like that at my school growing up. Like I said, I'd never seen any of it. So, and I was probably very naive, but that was the difference between where I grew up and where I was teaching at. So the last school district I was in,
wouldn't you say that family structure had also dramatically changed in those years?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, especially from where I grew up. I grew up just outside of Houston, Texas. And it was pretty conservative.
Back then in the 90s.
The whole thing, well, the yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, that you hear about the South was very true. You didn't say those kind of things. We still had where your hair couldn't touch your ears or your collar, kind of a thing, and so it was very conservative. And
did they teach the Bible in your school at all, or did they have?
No.
Okay.
But we still had school prayer before every football game and before every commencement and everything like that. So it wasn't perfect, but it was still very conservative compared to anywhere that I taught at or was involved with as a adult, by far.
So seeing all of this difference between your school and the ones you were teaching in, you both were like, we're not going to let our kids go there. Is that?
Well, that's really kind of the funny thing is when we first got married, that's actually a funny marriage story. It was one of those, we usually try to, talk about a lot of all of our views and thoughts and, see where we each were at and stuff.
Yeah. Well, while we were dating, we talked nonstop.
So we were on the way home from our honeymoon, and our honeymoon we did down in Florida where Anne was from, and we were driving back up to college, which we were going to college in Northeast Pennsylvania at the time. And
married a few days.
Yeah, married, well,
a week
or so. And we're talking, and somehow schooling came up with kids. And
yeah, I think I was driving at this point. We're on the interstate going north, because I remember holding on to that wheel like I could never let go. I'm like, so when we put our kids in private Christian school and stuff, that's going to be okay, right? And he's like, no, we would never put our kids in a private Christian school. They'd be like totally unsocialized. We're going to put them in public school, of course. And I'm like, no, we would never put our kids in those horrible public schools. And then this question crosses your mind like, oh boy, did I marry the wrong guy? Oh my goodness. Anyway, but we neither one of us thought we should homeschool. But like homeschoolers, that's just weird.
Well, at this point in time, the only homeschoolers I knew dressed really weird, acted really weird, and were pretty much unsocialized individuals. And that's what I grew up with as a viewpoint of what a homeschooler was.
That's the common view.
Homeschool uniform of the blue denim jumper smock and white shoes and bobby socks and your hair that's like cut in the bowl shape and stuff. That literally is what all the homeschoolers I knew, that's what they looked like and acted like. So,
like me as a child.
So you can see where my conservative public school system and why I'm like, no, we're not doing that. And I had actually been in a couple Christian schools in different places at this time, and I felt like the Christian school was full of hypocrisy, because at least in the public school, everybody's not as a sinner, and you're just going there and it. But the Christian school was supposed to be Christian, and yet they all act like sinners still too. And I didn't see any difference. So I'm like, why are we going to go and pay for all this if it's just the same as public school? Now, that being said, I learned very quickly that the public school systems in most of our country were much worse than even the Christian schools that I had been to. So.
Wow. So
that was an interesting. So we were like, homeschooling was off the mat, was not on the table. I should say not off the table.
But by the time our first child was getting close to kindergarten age, you were through college, you were starting to teach, and no.
My college experience I ended up going to public university and graduating from public university with my degree in secondary education. And by that time, I had seen where secondary education was going with what I was learning. And I had, of course, my internships and stuff in public school system. I had dealt with mostly, actually, a great deal of, my brain just left me. What is the name of the schools?
No Child Left Behind.
No.
I don't want to get too philosophical in the middle of the story, because I'm interested in hearing the rest of the story and the bus and the church planning, because that's all interesting stuff. Yeah. But I'm also curious about what your thoughts are on, both of you, your thoughts on why the school system has spiral down the toilet?
Maybe you'll have a different thought, but I think evolution is a big piece of it. That there is no God. Why would you pray? There is no God. Of course, they're all accepting of all religions, but frankly, they don't believe that there is a creator. I feel like creation is a huge part of it. And this kind of leads into why we even came into Torah, or the Father was preparing our hearts for Torah, because during this time, even as we were working in ministry at our local church as well, and realizing that, well, there's even a little bit of our story where the Father we thought he was calling us into missions and overseas missions, because that's where real missionaries go. And so we felt that all of those people over there, they have never read their Bible. They have atheism and humanism and all of this at the basis of everything they believe. And we should go over there and we should start in Genesis 1, and we should teach them because they don't know anything. How can they make sense of the New Testament if they haven't read Genesis, if they don't believe Genesis is true? And that was a huge piece. And then realizing as he got involved in the public school system, because this was all kind of happening at the same time. Our own country doesn't believe Genesis is true. They have no idea what the Bible says. They've never read the Bible. I feel like over the last 100 years, our churches in America are kind of whitewashed. You go to church, that's what moral people do. Your moral people bring their kids up in a youth group and they send them there. But these teenagers are not taught that the Bible is actually true. Real truth comes from your science classes. Real truth comes from your revised history classes, but not from the Bible. And so when these kids, anyone with a brain, go, why am I going to church to do something that isn't even true? The social club isn't that great. There's a better social club out there. Why would we do that? Why? I felt that way at times. Like if our Bible's not even true, then we could go have more fun other places. Frankly, we could just live a life however we want, without rules and without judgment from the people in the church about our hairstyles or this or that. Why, if the Bible is just a collection of myths, would we devote so much effort and time to it? So let's go find out something that's actually true, like real science, like evolution. And I'm picking on evolution, but it kind of feels to me like that's where it's undermining of the Bible's not true anyway. So why would you do it?
You can. I could speak like hours on this, so I'll behave myself. But so evolution, yes. So if we are not obviously created by God, then and we're just evolved things, then why do we need a creator? Why do we need to follow his commands?
Why do we need rules
and his Torah and things like that? We can do our own thing, and don't we nowadays know better than back then how things are supposed to be done? So why would we look at those antiquated laws and try to do them when we're so much superior now in our intellect and knowledge and how we do things? So in the public school system, the evolution permeates everything. So you don't get taught evolution in science class, and I'll share this. This was something that I actually really woke up to when I had the opportunity to sub in different classes for teachers that had got sick during the day or something, and they needed someone to fill a class for a short time. I was able to do this, as well as doing my own classes and teaching history, because I was a history teacher, was my degree. And the science would start out with science, and you would just start learning science. But the history classes would start out the first 6 weeks of class to up to a quarter, we're teaching you evolution. That's your history class is where they taught evolution, not in science. Mm-hmm. And so you learned about that man started from, apes and all that jazz, and then it evolved slowly into semi-humans, and then eventually into humans. And then, here's when certain parts of civilization started. Here's when fire started, here's where men started from, i.e. Africa, coming out of Africa from the, I forget the people who started that all up with Lucy, one of the supposed intermediaries between man and apes and stuff. But that was where you were taught all this, and it was taught as fact, even though it had no substantial evidence whatsoever to do. And so
that's horrible.
Kids would learn it there, and you didn't have to prove it because it's not science, it's history. You don't have to verify all these things. You don't have to tell why it's true. You just say it is true.
So brainwashing of the myth of evolution is the answer, basically.
In history class,
Yes.
not in science.
So do you
Yes.
agree that evolution and its evil claws being put into the young children is part of the reason why the school system's degrading then?
Absolutely.
Sure. It undermines authority. It undermines the family as taught in scripture. And if every man does what is right in their own eyes because it's survival of the fittest, or, we're improving and getting better all the time, so my ideas are superior to your ideas, and everyone in an entire school building feels that way, why would they listen to a teacher? Why would they listen to administration?
Yeah.
Why would they listen to their parents? Every man is doing what is right in their own eyes. Can I interject something though? Because as he's a teacher and we are starting to have children and then we're starting to homeschool, one of the things I noticed is that, and we're talking early 2000s here, but the homeschool curriculum was exactly the same as the public school, and they put Christian labels on it. I could name names, but I won't, of Christian publishing companies who start their history classes exactly the same way he just said.
With evolution?
And with
Yes.
evolution, and these are Christian publishers.
Name
and so
names, Anne. Name names.
Name. Well, okay. So the Well-Trained Mind, Peace Hill Press, those would be some of the ones, classical education, classical conversations, and things like that.
Out those villains.
Yeah, frankly. And that was partly why we were motivated to begin. We started writing Bible and history curriculum in the early 2000s, around 2005, same time I started with my publishing as other books.
Yeah.
And because we're like, wait a second, the Bible is either true or not true. Now, I mean, the Father's watching all of this. He's got a sense of humor. He says, oh, you think the Bible's true, huh? Let's see how far you think it's true. But really, truly, he was preparing our hearts because we were passionate about. I heard he came home and told me the troubles these kids were in. I also was a childbirth educator at this time, and I would do counseling for teen moms. That's really the only childbirth classes I taught were teen moms from his high school. 13, 15, we saw the end result of where your philosophical beliefs take you in life. And we had to help these kids come out of it. You had parents in witchcraft, many. I mean, just we could go on and on and on with stories of wreck.
I got a kid threatened to kill me in class one time. Stories of kids chucking their entire desk at the teacher and things.
Demonic.
I mean, just awful stories.
Yeah.
Story after story. And these are in not in like the inner city schools. These are in rural towns in Iowa and Missouri.
Good places.
And
And so we didn't want this for our family, and we were like, wait a second, homeschoolers are taking their kids out of public schools to prevent this from happening to their children, but their curriculum is exactly the same. So
what's going to be the difference?
There's going to be no difference.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So a lot of parents are intimidated to homeschool. They feel like, I'm not educated enough, I don't have an education degree, et cetera, et cetera. What made you guys feel like you could write curriculum, let alone just teach your kids? You just felt like it was necessary, or how did you have the
Can I share again? He was smart. He had a
okay. So I was just gonna say that she is smart too. I mean, I'm gonna brag on her.
No,
okay.
that's not what happened, though.
She's a valedictorian of a small Christian school. Graduated with almost a 4.0. Had scholarships to several places. Went and placed third in a national writer competition, writing and grammar competition. So Don't let her fool you. She knows what she's talking about.
Yes,
She's
but
very
he
smart.
has a degree in education.
So
We were married
was we just talking
when
about that?
we were in school.
Wasn't
So
much.
like I like got to type all his papers and we got to talk through all of it. So at least I feel like I got the same education he got. Really,
She did.
He had to submit everything for state standards in his lesson plan. So we have really good grasp on how to do standards for education. We lived in quite a few different states.
I came in right as No Child Left Behind was being instituted.
What a mess.
Which was just an absolute disaster. Yeah.
But here, I think this is the answer. When we started to see Torah, the thing that really rocked my world, because he was a history major. I remember telling him, honey, I hate history. History's so boring. And he's like, no, it's not boring.
It's amazing.
Like, yeah, it's boring. But then when we started to see Torah, well, I'll give you a little story. We lived in Iowa. He's a counselor and a football coach at this point still. This is when we were starting to see things. And the same friend that came to visit at the women's conference told me to read the book of Hosea. And in Hosea, we could learn about the northern tribes and the southern tribes. And I knew enough from our Baptist days to know that there were two branches of Israel, the two kingdoms. And I had no idea whatever happened to any of them in history because I hate history. I never paid attention to history. And we would read it, and she said, you are in that book. And I'm like, we're what? And she's like, yeah, the whole house of Ephraim is us. Or if it's not us, we're grafted in. And so she tied the Old Testament together and the New Testament in a way that made me go, I can't even fact check her. I don't know enough history. I have no idea if she's telling me the truth. And meanwhile, I had another friend down in Florida who was learning Torah. And she now is one of the authors of some of the history books that we have in our curriculum. But at that point, she was just a friend. And she is saying, yeah, the whole Bible, it tells the whole story from Genesis all the way till Yeshua comes back.
She was
like, what?
She was doing like a blogging through Revelation. And as she was blogging through Revelation, was seeing Torah.
Yeah.
And Revelation.
Yeah, she came to Torah by blogging through it. So all that to say, the thing that rocked our world is we kept telling people the Bible, you have to start in Genesis. But I started to realize that the Bible had answers for history all the way through. Like you could study the Middle Ages from the Bible. Yeah, you could study all of it. And I was like, this is so relevant. And the piece that made me want to write it is I'm like, I bet there's other moms out there who hate history and they don't know this. I bet we could write about it. That's really where it started.
Going back to you were talking, asking your question about the public school system. I remember, learning about dinosaurs in school. And this is when I was in junior high school, and going, I can't believe in dinosaurs because dinosaurs are from evolution and they must be fake because the evolution says they're from evolution. And so that's in the 80s, right? I graduated in 91.
Back then. They were
but that back then there were no resources to explain. There was no one, at least that I knew of at this time. There was, but I didn't know that. And it wasn't like far and wide like it is today. Anybody like going and researching from a biblical mindset science. And so, when evolution came out and became such a storm in the public society, there was everybody in Christianity was caught off guard, and no one had any answers because no one had bothered to have to research that concept. And it took 100 years for I'm saying Christianity, people who believed in the Bible and believed it was true and its form and its literal form, to come and be able to catch up. And I think by the 70s they were starting to catch up. Nowadays you have Answers in Genesis, Creation Research Institute. There's books. There's scientists that have done all sorts of YouTubes and stuff. And now we have actual people who are smart and know these things saying we can prove better what you're talking about than you can by using creation and using the scriptures as a scientific textbook. Isaac Newton, we found through studying him, and went through and read a couple of his books and preparing for our science and history curriculums. But Isaac Newton was a staunch believer, and he said, everything I learned or did was because I saw it in the Bible and wanted to prove the Bible was true. And then she went on, and he actually wrote Bible commentaries. He has a Bible commentary in the Book of Revelation.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome too.
And
but we didn't answer their question.
Okay, what was their question?
Their question was, how does a homeschool mom feel competent to teach her own children?
I'm still going back to the one about problems with public schools.
Well, yeah. Well, so how do you feel competent? Because the Word of God is our competence. We just sit down at the table with your children and study the Word of God, verse by verse by verse.
So in the process of developing Homeschooling Torah, and the problems she was earlier saying with having 7 children in 7 different grades, and how do you teach all them and not spend 24 hours a day just teaching school, and your kids wanting to kill you and poke their eyes out because they're so mind-numbingly bored, and so she was debating this, and I was talking with her mom, and her mom grew up in rural Michigan, and went to, at one time, a one-room schoolhouse. And she was thinking about this and asked her mom, how did that work? Because you obviously have kindergarten all the way through senior and high school, 8th grade there? Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. But originally they would go all the way through high school, or aspects of that. And how did one teacher teach all those grades to 20, 30 students, kind of a thing? And through researching and discussing that, realize that you don't teach every single grade level, and every kid their grade level. The teaching to the class happens at basically the middle ages, 4th through 8th grade, and that's who you teach to in your core of actually your lessons. And then from there, you break down or up to the grade levels. And a lot of times what would happen is the older kids would actually teach the younger kids, and the teacher would teach the older kids separate for the things that they need to know above and beyond that core grade level area.
And the little ones are just listening to the lessons of the older students, and they're like, oh, I already know that because I've been hearing or hearing the teacher talk about it. I think also just realizing that we as parents really weren't well educated here in the United States. I don't think that we really are that well educated. We are well socialized, but we're not well educated.
So what you're saying
is we can learn with our students.
Yes.
We need to be humble and just, you know what, I don't know how to teach this, but let's just do this together. And this is a Torah concept, because the Torah says you're to teach your children I always get these out of order. As you sit down, as you stand up, as you walk along the way, as you lie down. See, I'm totally out of order. But as this that's a Torah concept, is discussion, and it doesn't have to be as complicated as we make it, basically.
Yes. So I am a teacher. I've been in public school system. It's not rocket science to teach kids.
No,
and a lot of the resources that are available today are so extensive to help parents. Mm-hmm. Maybe, 30, 40 years ago when homeschooling was still quasi in its infancy, maybe then it might be a little bit more difficult for everybody. But the problem is so many parents come to homeschooling with a public school mentality. And they think, I have to have my kids teach in school 7 hours a day, and we have to have tests and quizzes, and we have to, do everything this certain way and lecture and all, and they have to be at the front of the class lecturing their kids for a half hour for each lesson before, and it's not like that whatsoever in homeschooling. No. It's a total.
Can you walk us through a day of homeschooling multiple ages like you had to do? Start in the morning.
Sure. All right, multiple ages, and realizing that now my kids are grown. I only have 2 students in high school right now, and so they're doing a ton of their work even independently. But let me go back. Let me rewind back to when we had all 7 of them back at home. I only ever had 6 in school at one time because either I always had preschoolers or someone graduating on the other end. But walking through a day, you get up in the morning, you have breakfast together. I'm going to say the word together a lot because together is the key. But you have breakfast together. You send off the older kids to do the dishes together because why is mom doing it all? They need to learn these life skills. And then usually I would focus on my little ones first because, of course, they've got the shorter attention span. They're going to wear out pretty soon. So, do your phonics and your math with them. But then you get back at the table and you read your Bible together. And this was what was so precious to me when we came into Torah. Let's just read our Bible. And by that is you don't need a curriculum. Open your Bible, read a verse or two. As soon as you start to think of something, oh my goodness, that's cool, stop and talk about it. Get as far as you can in 30 minutes. I mean, parents like to go for a lot longer, but children really need you to stop.
Well, and the nice thing they do, but in homeschooling, the nice thing about it is if you do want to go on a rabbit trail, you can.
Yeah, but you can't do that every day.
No, you'll wear yourselves out.
But so keep an eye on the clock and be ready to stop the discussion. You can come back tomorrow and pick up at verse 13 or whatever. But then usually I would start with the subjects after that are harder. So math usually came next. Because math, you wear out. Again, you've got a 5th grader who's growing and needs a lot of snacks, and they don't have a long attention span for multiplication and division. So I try to teach my kids together. So if I'm teaching my 5th grader long division, hey, 3rd grader, pay attention because this is not that hard. You got this. And 1st grader, here's a chart. You don't know your multiplication facts yet, but I bet you could figure out how to divide pizza. And so this is kind of the concept of our curriculum, is to try to do these subjects together. But then as soon as possible, when we got through those, reading, writing, and arithmetic, we would be back to history. And in history was let's read a book together. And in our house, it looked like my little ones playing Legos all over the floor. And our rule was, as long as you're not like crashing your Lego ship so loudly that I can't read above that sound, then we're good. Okay. So we would sit in the living room or at the table, depending on the season, or outside, whatever, you got freedom. But I would let them color or play with toys, but they just had to be respectful of my voice would give out, so you can't be so loud. And then how did I know they were learning? Because we didn't have tests and quizzes. Well, it's really easy. We just stop every couple paragraphs and I say, okay, so tell me, Eric, what did you learn? And he says it back to me. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's awesome. I didn't even catch that. And the mom is learning right along. And again, I had to keep my eye on the clock because I would have too much fun and go way too long for them. Sometime maybe late morning, I'm going to send them outside to play because they're tired of learning. Their brains are full and they need to be excused. But I'm a little tired too by that point. So I'm going to go, start a couple things in the kitchen that we might need for later. After lunch, we'd probably come back to some science. But usually our afternoons were free.
Okay, so on the flow here in the morning, the middle ones are doing math together and you're trying to keep them all on the same page in a way. And the older ones that are in high school are doing something on their own, I assume. They're teaching themselves.
No, back then we just did it together. So my high school students, usually the difference for them for high school and science is I would assign them extra reading to do later in the afternoon. Because we would be done with our together school by lunch or maybe 1 or 2 o'clock if I was long-winded. Right. And then I would say for my high school students, I would have them go read some Eusebius, go read some primary sources and write me a paragraph on what you learned. Or even better, we have to go run errands, sit there in the car and tell me about it. And let's talk about it. But because some of my kids were allergic to writing paragraphs. But so I just want to know that they learned it and could communicate it back to me. But usually we did it all together, all the way from preschool, I've made my little ones take naps in the afternoon, but from non-napping age all the way through high school, they were learning together, but then I would assign extra reading. You know how many books? I did not keep 40 boxes of banana book.
No, on the bus.
I didn't keep it because we eventually...
She had 18 feet to put for books. So that's how much books we went down to.
And I have maybe grown a few thousand books since then, but because I love books.
Right.
But I mean, I'm constantly telling my kids, oh, that's such a good book. You have to read that before you can graduate. There's way too many.
So synopsis-wise, you get up in the morning.
Yeah.
You have your routines, your morning routines. Some people, maybe they go to eating breakfast and they're slower getting around. They drink some coffee and then they go into their, maybe they do devotions in the morning to sit individually. And then they come together to do school. Other people, maybe they live on a homestead and they get up in the morning and have to feed their animals and do all that. So they do all that. And then they all come together. Say 9-ish, 10-ish, somewhere in that.
What kind of
and you have your together school, your Bible, your history, your science, and do all those kind of things. And then you have lunch, and then they go off for some recess/PE. And by the way, running around outside is PE. You don't have to have
chores.
PE, or
mow the lawn.
Going for a horseback ride. I don't, whatever. Then you come back, and the older kids, you put your young ones down for a nap, and the older ones are taught there in the afternoon on their upper level subjects that are more one-on-one.
It depends year by year.
Yeah.
It depends.
But that's the idea.
The general idea.
And then after that, then they have and so maybe that's an hour or two of that, and then their homework for an hour or two after
and
that.
And while they're doing homework, I'm like working on my business
or maybe she's having to feed the little baby.
Nurse a baby.
Do things like that.
You can nurse a baby and read a history book at the same time and have lots of discussions. That's, my little ones were with us. They had to stay. We had a rule that if they couldn't see my eyes, then I couldn't see them, and that was not acceptable. So they had to be able to see my eyes. Wherever they were, they had to be able to see me. So I put the onus on them. If they couldn't see me, they were in trouble. But that keeps everything within range, and they can be playing with toys. Again, if they're so loud that we can't have our discussion, they're too loud. But I also make sure they have a chance to go run around outside and scream and jump on trampolines and stuff. So there's a balance, but I guess we're trying to say that it's a lifestyle of discussing and doing together, whether we're doing the chores together or prepping meals together or talking great, science concepts together.
Okay, I got a question then. I was homeschooled. And when I got into difficult subjects that my mom actually hadn't done for a while, like chemistry and algebra 1, algebra 2, this stuff, if she had time, she would go over the beginning section of the chapter with me, and then I would do it. And so my homework, you mentioned homework, would be doing that day's lesson, actually. And then at some point she didn't have time, so I had to just do the whole thing. So I just had to teach myself those things, the hard subjects, algebra, etc. And the books that we had helped do that. Is that kind of what you guys did with the older kids? Or?
Yes, I would say absolutely.
And I valued that. I didn't realize till now how much I valued that, because I learned how to learn something difficult on my own. And now I know how to learn something difficult on my own. And that was cool.
That's a lot of once you give the assignments and things with especially the older kids, they're going to be self-taught and learn a lot of this stuff on their own. You're there to kind of, at that point in time, you're no longer having to be there kind of sitting over them. And you start, so when the kids are little, let's say preschool through 3rd grade, you're like hands-on almost all the time. Themselves. Yeah, especially the little kids, you're reading instructions, you're doing all that stuff with them. Then 4th through 8th grade, you're more like coaching them and mentoring them, because you're there, but you're not going to have to read all the instructions. They should be able to do those things, and you're just there to kind of maybe clarify and make sure they're getting what the concepts are going on and helping them get going on those kind of things. But then by the time they're in high school, it's much more independent learning, and you're there more just as that just that a helpline if there's something where they come up against a roadblock and need a little bit more help and to try and understand this, that's where you come at. And I mean, I'm pretty good at math, and but last time I took math was in 1997 in college, and I did really good on it in algebra 2, but I got a 98 for the algebra 2, but that doesn't mean I remember anything. And the crazy thing also is that verbiage and stuff changes over time. And so some of the things I learned and the way they talked when I was teaching it is different today. So the kids would be showing me their stuff, and I'm like, I don't remember this verbiage at all. It was like a foreign language. So then we'd have to go online and just start trying to research it, and things like, like Khan Academy and I don't know, there's some other ones, math ones and stuff like that. You can go on to kind of maybe help explain it, just YouTube's. So there's a lot of different resources now that can kind of help with those nuances of things you may not remember to help. And probably the kid's going to get it before the parent anyhow. So
when the kid gets older, basically the parent is there to help them when they get to difficult points, right? And
yes.
You're like, I just can't figure this out, Mom, or right? Is this how you? I mean, that's how we did it. That's how I did it.
See, at the very least, I think that's definitely how we do math, advanced math for high school. That's absolutely how we do it. But let's go back to science for a minute. See, I'm a little bit of a weird bird. I feel like our goal for our students is to teach them how to learn and how to look things up and how to verify truth. But how are they going to do that if I'm not aware of what they're learning? Now, we run a business right now. We spend a lot of time running Homeschooling Torah. It pretty much consumes our lives on a lot of days. But having said that, I can assign my high school students a topic. Let's say we're learning about physics this week, and
sound waves.
All right, let's do sound waves, okay? And we can send them off to watch YouTubes, or we can send them off to read a textbook. But when we connect at next time, supper or in a really crazy week, at the very least, we're going to connect on Erev Shabbat. We need to make sure as parents that we know what our students are learning and challenge them to present it from a biblical perspective. And as high school students, they are going to be they're adults almost. I mean, they're barely not adults, just not 20 yet, according to the Torah. They're thinking like adults. They're thinking hard things. And we need to make sure that we as parents are not just checking out. It's not so much about whether they can write reports, but can they communicate truth? Can they defend their view with scripture? So sound waves, when did the Father create sound waves? Tell me where that was in the Bible. And can you prove that? Can you show me how did he do that? What evidence is there that he did that? And what good does that do? Because we're supposed to have dominion over his creation. We're supposed to take dominion. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. And so knowing about sound waves, how is that going to make you a better adult? What are you going to do with that in your life? What are you going to do for his kingdom? Like what kind of responsible decisions are you going to make because you know this? Like these kinds of things where you're projecting that your children in another 10, 20 years are going to be parents themselves. They're going to own businesses. They're going to be working jobs out in the world, or they're going to own their own, whatever it is. The point of education is to raise up a godly generation that can think critically, can apply what they know to the creation around them and make it better and make the lives of people better, bring them to Yeshua, make him the light. How are we going to do that if we don't challenge them and push their buttons in all of these ways? So I feel, again, like discussion, it rules. And if we don't get through a textbook, but I taught my children to think, well, they can look up sound waves later when they need it. You know, if they're going to go be an electrician, one of our sons is an electrician, he can learn that on the job, but he needs to know how to think. And he needs to know how to think biblically and critically according to the word of God. You know, Isaiah says, come, let us reason together, Jehovah says. So we need to be able, how do we teach our children to reason if we don't ever play devil's advocate or, you know, challenge them on their thinking? So.
100% agree. Sorry, you have a question, but I have a question too. Do you recommend, and did you / do you do yearly tests? Like we had to do either California achievement test here in Ohio, or we had to present to the local teacher our curriculum and our grades. So I don't know what you guys recommend there.
So number one, we recommend that whatever your state requirements are, that you follow those.
Romans 13,
Yes.
Follow your local authority. Do what the government says.
Yeah.
Do
So
you have to do any more than that?
do you have to do any more than that? No. So if like state of Michigan does not require testing,
Move to Michigan.
so where we currently live, and so we don't require testing of our kids. But in Iowa, they were required every year to do it. And the frustration is I'm here and I'm proctoring the testing in the public school system, and my kids are going and doing it, and it literally is this is absolutely wrong. But the school district would require the homeschoolers to do a much higher standard than the kids in the public school.
Really?
And it was ridiculous. So my 9-year-old son had to go and do testing for like 7 straight hours with only a 30-minute break for lunch, in a room by himself with a person proctoring over him. That is totally wrong and against every single thing that the public school system requires of the students. And this happens over and over again. And so parents need to not just accept whatever their local school district is doing, but require them to follow the standards with their own children. Now, if you have to do it at home or something like that, that's fine. Or go to a place like where they do like proctoring as a whole group of different people. Yeah, that's one. That's another. My kids have taken the ACT and SAT when they graduated, just so that the requirements for going to college or things like that. But typically with the CAT or the MCAT or the Texas assessments, and then Iowa, I think, has one that's pretty popular.
Yeah,
those Iowa basic skills test. I mean, if they're offered properly, it's one thing, but there's proven fact that if these, he had 5 hours where he went from math to science to English, and your brain, a 9-year-old's brain just cannot handle all that and do well.
Yeah, I remember it was 3 hours or something for us at least. When we took a break for lunch also.
You answered this question, Anne, before I could ask it, and you answered it so beautifully. I was going to say, what is the point of education? What are we even trying to do with these kids? And how do we know if we did it? And you already talked about they are productive citizens. They can think and discern. They can reason scripturally and defend their faith. So they have a sophisticated mind. And I don't know, I probably missed some things. But I wanted to ask you, how does that shake out by age? It's are we trying to produce a little 3-year-old prodigy who can do that? Or are you focusing on something with the 3-year-old, something with the middle grades, and then building on it for the high school? What are your goals in each station, I'll say?
We're both I want to answer.
So she asked you, so I guess you get to answer this one.
Good, I get to answer. You can add your 2 cents. Okay, by age, I can answer this. I have opinions. You didn't know that. By age, I would say up to 18 months old, my goal in life is to teach them to hear my voice and obey me. And I say up to 18 months because I think people start that way too late, and then they have misery, and then their whole first 5 years are filled with chasing this child everywhere. So no, I say by 18 months, your child should be able to hear your voice and obey your voice. And it should be done in a really sweet and loving way. But
I'm so sorry. I agree. How do you do it? Just dive in, if you don't mind, not too deep, but all right. How do you get them to, what do you have to do? You have 2 sentences to tell us how to get the 0 to 18 month old
to obey. Yeah.
2 sentences. Realize that your job is not just to snuggle this adorable creation that the Father gave you, but your job is to direct their path. Your job is to shape them, get them in the habit of listening to you. And when they won't listen, well, require them to. They're tiny. So, be in charge. If you had they're not puppies. So to bear with this example, because I don't want to say that they are. But if you had a puppy, you'd be the boss. You'd be like, I'm the alpha dog and you're the puppy. Hello, listen to me.
Well, you should be.
But you are the mother and he is the father. And this child is not smart. They weren't born super smart. They got to learn it. Their neurons are still growing. So while they are still growing, teach them to listen to your voice. Direct their little head to look at you. Say, no, look at mommy. Shake your little head. Yes. Okay, now do what I said. And if they won't, well, pick them up and make them do it. I mean, they're tiny. Then you don't have to be like crazy.
That's okay. And I didn't want to interrupt because I like the flow. I like how you're progressing through age, but sorry, go on.
So require the obedience.
And also, if they're not obeying when you tell them something, then you need to escalate the situation and shall I say it from a biblical perspective? There's a point where God says, if they're not listening, then pain must be a part of the situation. So there's consequences, and that may be little, but there's a point where
it's so much easier when they're little, tiny, and they're
So an 18-month-old, to get their attention and get them to obey. If they're not, it's a simple,
Oh wow!
and they're done.
We're going to put that on YouTube. But anyway.
You can cut that out.
No, you can put it on.
We're good.
But the point is, they are tiny. You can teach them, fold your hands, have self-control. Learn to sit on my lap without screaming. And by the way, we're homeschooling our older kids here, so this is an easy time. I'm going to teach, so you can sit here and...
I was also going to say is don't give them choices. They're 18 months. They're a year. They don't have choices. The parents, you choose for them. Don't go, Johnny, would you like the blue cup or the yellow cup? Or Johnny, do you want peas or spinach or peas or a peanut butter jelly sandwich? Because they're not going to choose what's best. They're going to choose whatever they want. And that's starting a negative behavior in children.
Be the mom. Be the dad. Be in charge. Then, though, okay, I don't know. Maybe I should have said up to age 3. But around age 3, your children start going, why? 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 And when they start saying why, start giving them answers from the Word of God.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I a caveat to that? You don't start giving them answers for why until when they have obedience from the get-go. When you're saying do something and they're doing it, then they're ready for when they start asking why to give them why.
If they're
just going, why? I don't want to do that. Then that's not the time to tell them why.
But I'm assuming that they're already obedient.
Okay.
Already obedient.
So I just wanted to put that caveat on there.
So a child that's already listening to your voice, already doing what you say with a happy heart, then you start to fill their little tank up with all the reasons why. Why? Why is this? Why is that? And then this, again, discuss. Why is the moon so big? Well, because it's the middle of the month. This is his calendar. We can look at the moon all the time. See if you can find it when it's just a sliver. Teach your children why does this world work the way it does? Then it's time to teach also skills, basic life skills. Teach them to read. Faith comes by hearing and hearing by the Word of God. They need to learn to read and write.
Can I say something on that?
Yes.
So our kids, most of them didn't learn to read till they were 6-7 years of age. We were not these prodigy children at 3.
We didn't have any prodigies.
But so at 3, though, the way you get them to start learning how to read is you start make sure you're reading to them and taking the time to read books to
Snuggles.
them. And before bedtime or in the early afternoons, things like this. And that's another thing of Together School is the mom is reading stuff to the children too. And so the older ones, maybe you think they're going to get bored, but we were amazed at how our older ones enjoyed it just as much as the younger ones. And it was kind of more younger because the older ones could actually read it themselves and maybe read it faster. But in reading to everybody, it allowed everybody to come together and hear what's going on, and then allowed for better discussion, and also in improving the little kids' abilities to learn to read, while the older ones are learning how to sit still and listen. And so it's actually developing listening skills, which is a very important skill that kids need to learn too.
So you start with character, you start with obedience, you start with the heart of learning to obey and respect authority, respect property of others, show kindness to siblings, all of these character issues. But then you move to skills. Okay, beyond reading and writing, how do you do the dishes? Can you flip an egg? Can you do the chores?
I'm sorry. So on that note, in my teaching skills classes, the one thing I learned as part of all that was there's a difference between basic rules and procedures. And so you want to have very few rules and a bunch of procedures. So if you have your kids, you want to teach them rules, which, typically there was 2 in essence, but they're be respectful to each other, and don't use any foul language or something. Something. I mean, this is public school, but you get the idea. You're not obey your teacher. Show respect to him and each other. Show respect to others, to property and things like that. Now, once they get those 3 things down, or in helping them to understand that, is developing procedures. So in a public school, it might be, you're not going to go out, get up and go sharpen your pencil while the teacher's talking. Or you're not, if you need to go to the restroom, you need to raise your hand and ask to go to the restroom. And, those are procedures. And that's the skills she's talking about, is teaching your kids how to do things the way you want them to be done, so that they have those skills. And when you ask them to do something, then they know what your expectation is. Because a lot of parents never teach skills, and they just think their kids should understand. And then they get upset at their kids when they don't know how to do something.
It is a parent's job to teach their children. We don't expect our children to know something if we haven't taught them.
Yeah.
If they don't know how to do something, well, hello, add it to the to-do list, because that's our fault. They don't know it. So skills would also be like memorization. You need to memorize as much scripture as you can pack into their little heads. And so I would say the early elementary years would just be full of memorization, as well as memorize all your math facts, memorize all your states and capitals, memorize all the dates that you can get into them in history as possible. Just memorize, go outside and draw things so that you learn, plants, and you can identify as many things as possible in his creation. But this is like an elementary skill. And then if we go back to his football examples, because he's corrupted me with football over the years. So if you're going to teach football to children, it's skills. You learn to catch a ball, you learn to throw a ball, you learn, all the proper stances. But as you get older and you get closer to the middle school years, and certainly, let's say middle school, then let's get on the sidelines and actually coach you. And we're going to put you in real life situations and coach you as to how to act in that situation. And then finally in high school, we don't want to just coach them how to live. We want them to be world changers, right? So the way that we do that is we need to teach them how to communicate truth. What have we taught them all these years? Now, can they put it in their own words and communicate it to someone else? So this is why we teach how to write, and this is why we teach speech class and things like that, because they need to be able to take what's in their head and put it back out to someone else, because we're not just selfishly learning all of this so we can be a sponge and be all gross and cruddy because nothing's ever been squeezed out. We need to learn how to take the things that the Father has given us and squeeze them out for the benefit of others. And that's our end goal.
That allows us to then add more into that.
Then you can put more in, absolutely.
Yeah, but if you're never squeezing it out, you become stale.
So who can they teach? Yeah, who can they teach? And it doesn't have to be teaching. Our children, they're not all a bunch of extroverts, but they need to be able to learn to communicate in society and to be able to communicate their views and thoughts.
I think that's a good lead into how do you make sure they aren't this, belly button staring Pee Wee Herman. I mean, how do you make sure that your children aren't the picture of homeschoolers
I grew up with?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Basically me as a kid. No, I'm just kidding, but really.
So, and maybe we're a lot of it, of course, is who we are somewhat too. Maybe I don't want to. No, I don't want to give excuses. Anybody can do this. It may take you as a parent learning yourself how to be something you aren't necessarily, so for your kids' sake. But that's part of being a parent and an adult. You know, the whole "I have to adult today." Yeah, you do, especially for your kids.
I hate to interrupt you, but that is huge. Like when people ask me this question, because I was homeschooled, I always say, okay, the kids I knew growing up who were homeschooled, whose parents were introverted, very introverted and weird, they were too. But the kids whose parents were extroverted or even not extroverted, but they would, like you're saying, make the effort, and they would introduce the kids to others and make sure that they were enrolled in things. They were normal. So anyway, sorry. I have a dog in this fight, okay?
All right, I'm going to interrupt him. Before you say, I want to hear what you're going to say, but
We're
then
all
you got to let me get on my
interrupting.
soapbox.
Okay. All right. So from a small age, for instance, like go to playgrounds and your kids have to socialize, but don't like leave them there by themselves. And
No.
you're there so that they aren't learning bad things, but they're learning to socialize with other kids too, and adults and stuff. One of the key things that I say with parents is that we're not raising kids. We're raising adults. Don't train your kids to be a kid. Train your kid to be an adult. And so in that way, when my kids are going to go and talk to adults, I want to make sure that they are going to talk to the adult and they're going to be respectful of the adult and the fact that that's an adult, not another 2-year-old that they're talking to. So within reason, I expect them to address them properly. I expect them to answer questions that are asked, to look them in the eye, not like, we didn't allow our kids, if an adult asked a question like, "Hi, how are you doing today, Johnny?" We didn't let them go. If they started to do that, we're like, "No, you answer that," or if they're doing that one of those times where they're being defiant, we'd tell the adult, "Sorry, we're working on that." And then the child would probably know that sometime they're going to have some consequence that's going to help them to learn how they're going to do that the next time. Now,
play act in your living room.
If I haven't done that before with them, and then I shouldn't expect them. So I need to go home. Okay, this is a skill I haven't taught them, and I need to teach them that skill. And that's more of a procedure versus defiance. Now, if I've taught them that and I know they know how to do it, and then they went to this person and they asked and they refused to do it, then that's a defiance issue, and I need to deal with the heart, not with the skill. So
That's brilliant.
From a young age, going to playground, be involved in your congregation if you have one. Now, I know that's not always the case with everybody. But that would be a big thing. Go to find places maybe that you can at least go to a feast day or something that you can meet people that way maybe. I know people get involved in co-ops and stuff. We've never done that per se in our homeschooling. That's never been a thing for us, but I know a lot of people can do that.
Do you do sports? Have you guys done it? And can you find any that aren't on Shabbat?
It's really hard.
It's really hard, especially, you can with the little kids.
Yeah.
We only had, we had soccer with two of our kids, and then we had football with one of our kids in elementary, and then 1 year in junior high. But that was all.
We did ballet 1 year, but then they did a great big Christmas program, and we're like, oh.
Yeah.
It's been hard.
So, yeah, it's a touch and go with those kind of things.
Can I get on my soapbox?
Sure.
We want the soapbox. Let's have the soapbox.
I have a soapbox, and it plays into this. There have been a lot of memes out on Facebook lately about what is Sabbath. So a lot of times the memes will say things like, we rest, we go out and enjoy his creation, we read our Bible, we worship. And when I go to Leviticus chapter 23, verses 2 and 3, and it talks about the Shabbat, there is a phrase in there that no one's putting on cute memes. And I don't know why. It's not showing up. I really want to do something about this, but I'm not that creative with memes. But it says, have a holy convocation. It is a command on his Shabbat, it's also for all of his Moedim. So we say, well, Father, I can't do that command. There's nobody near me. I don't know how to do it. Or I have people near me, but they're strange. So I can't go there. But it does not change the fact that it is a command. So here's the thing. When we have a command we can't keep, what should we do? We should put our face towards it, and we should work on trying to get it accomplished in our lives as soon as possible. And there's some options. So we could start something. We could and I think of Amy Gunther from Torah Sisters, how she has started all kinds of things to make that possible in her life. I look at people who move, frankly. They move. They go find a congregation. I mean, that's dramatic, but wholeheartedly following after his Torah. He knows what's good for us, and he knows what our children need. He knows what we need. And that gives our children a weekly network, a community of people that care for them and can shepherd them, and us. It gives us, the younger moms, the older moms, to look at and ask questions and find out, how did you do that in your life? How did you get your child to do that? Beyond, it's not just about asking Torah questions, about building strong families. And how are our men going to learn how to lead our families if they never have anywhere to go and be challenged and to lead? And how are us wives ever supposed to look to our husbands to do everything, meet every need in our life? Honey, you are this great, amazing man. And the man's like, oh, no, I'm not that. I can't do all that. They need other men. And our children need other children to be around. And yeah, I'm very aware of the fact that we're all a bunch of crazy wackos in the Torah movement, but we need each other. Yeah. And I really want to challenge all the meme makers to make sure they get all of the phrases in that verse in their memes.
Yeah. It's
soapbox over.
Leviticus 20.
100% agree with it.
That makes me think of a meme I just saw. Okay. I saw one of these memes.
Well, as some are wont to do, like this in the New Testament, this was recognized. Like, your soapbox is the same one that Paul was on. When he says, do not forsake the like assembly of the brethren, as some are wont to do. So people have been wanting to do this for a long time.
Yes. And 1 Peter 5, it says, train up the older men, train up the younger men, the older women, train up the younger men. I think that's Titus. No? There's also in 1 Peter too.
Yes, both.
But it's either 3 or 5. But anyhow, but how are you to do that if you're not meeting together? And it's Timothy and Titus both talk about the same thing also, that we're to be training, the older to be training the younger. The younger are supposed to be respectful and submissive to the older in order to learn and to grow up and to mature. And one thing that both with Homeschooling Torah in our home and in our congregation, Soul Sabbath Fellowship, that we have been earnestly trying to do is to help us understand that we don't want to be the only generation that understands Torah, and that our kids go right back into doing whatever, which we've seen over and over again in our 17 years now that we've been doing this, and people that have come into Torah only to turn around and leave it right back out, or their kids not following what they did. We need to guard. The scripture talks about keeping. We need to guard these things, and we need to have our kids guard these things. And so teaching and training the young people is something that is a requirement, and that can't be done if everybody's staying at home. And I also, there's some people in the Torah movement have bigger families and stuff. Well, it has to go beyond family, because family is very homogenous, and they become used to their ways, and there's no sharpening of iron sharpening iron, or as I have a dear brother in our congregation talks about, there's no one to knock the rough edges off of you. And part of meeting in community is learning to get along with people that are diverse from you. Mm-hmm. And God says, that's how I'm growing you. That's how.
Kraig, you're right. You're right, man. Like, do you know, we are supposed to be the body of the Messiah, right? And if we don't get together, then we won't be able to act as our component parts, and we won't be able to work together. How can a body work together when everyone's just in a hole in some holler? You know, we got to leave the holler. We have to assemble, and that way we can, like you're saying, knock off the rough edges. And the thing is, it's very tempting not to do it, because maybe you have rough edges, that need to be, and maybe I do, and so on and so forth. But we all have to be there so that we can make this whole body strong.
Yep. And we have the true understanding of diversity while also being Haman and unity. And that is something that, while is difficult to imagine, difficult to deal with, it's still a requirement. And even though we may not like it, introverts, you know what, you need to get at it and try and be with extroverts. And extroverts, you need to calm down a little bit so you can be with the introverts. And we have different skills. And if we better not be trying to get everybody the same skill, but on the same note, if you're not using your skills, then I likened it in the recent message I taught that we're like the human being, and we have this gigantor like arm wrestling arm that's like huge because everybody wants to be an arm. So you walk around, you're this anemic little human being with this giant arm, and basically you're worthless because you can only do one thing, but you certainly can't do everything that you need to do humanly possible because you are lopsided and your back's going to start hurting. We need to be whole. And if everybody's staying at home and not growing, then we are not going to be a whole body. And therefore we are going to be sickly and weak, as the Apostle Paul says, because we're not doing what we're supposed to. And then on top of that, I don't care if we are homeschooling and we're doing the best job we can with that. The likelihood is we're going to lose our children because someone in those children is going to go, I'm tired of being alone and at home all the time. I want people because I'm an extrovert, unlike my introvert parents. And they're going to go, phooey on what my parents said because I want to be around people. We need to have all those gambits in our lives and in our families and in our communities to be able to breed wholesome, healthy believers and congregations.
Yeah. If enough families disobey this injunction, then they won't have people to marry. I mean, this is what it comes down to. And they won't have people to make them normal who they're hanging out with. They won't have people to argue with as children so that they can realize what is expected and what's not. Like in homeschool, you guys can teach them. You can teach them a lot of things. You can teach them the way you act. You can teach them schooling, but teaching them how to act in a group of peers is something that must be learned by doing. And so that is, don't stay home, people. Come on.
Amen.
Can you tell who the extrovert is? Okay. I'm an extroverted introvert. I have another question. So how do you produce an adult from your children who loves Yah and doesn't just know about the Bible? Or, I should caveat, you can't fully control that because, right, it's like you have your inputs, what you do as a parent, and then they have the response of like their own heart and their own decision. But like, what would you think would be all the best inputs that you can put in to get the best chance of having a child who grows up to be an adult who actually like loves and wants to follow him?
I will say this: we don't shelter our children because our children will one day have to go out in the real world and be in the world while not being of it. That's the goal. And so, like going back to the whole evolution thing, we teach our kids evolution, but we teach it on our parameters and our timeline, not what the world says. So if I'm teaching it, I'm going to tell them what I believe first and set that down as the foundation in scripture, and then teach them evolution. And then begin to teach them, okay, what's wrong with this? What are the problems? What do you see versus scripture? And that's where the whole Together School, you communicate and you're talking this stuff over, you're asking questions and they're responding. You get to see the development of the critical thinking processes in your children. I don't hide my kids from television and video games and things like this either, because that's the world and they're going to see that no matter what. But I don't show my 5-year-old, a rated R movie or anything. And I don't show my 17-year-olds necessarily rated R movies, but there are some like, can I use this an example that might shock people? But okay, Saving Private Ryan. It's a rated R movie. It's a horrific movie. It's very graphic, lots of death, lots of blood, swearing, things like this. But it's a movie that's based upon what really was happening in reality and the realities of war. So I won't show my 10 or 12. I finally showed my 14-year-old this year with me. And what I do during that time is I'm explaining what's going on and why they're showing this. And this is what war is like in real life. It's not cutesy. It's not whitewash. This is, you're seeing body parts from your friend sticking out of him because he just got hit by a bomb. You're seeing someone right next to you you're talking to get shot in the head and dead instantly. These are realities of war. And how does, what is that going to do? How do we keep from doing this? What does the Bible say about war? I mean, quite frankly, the Bible isn't against war. The Bible says, if they're doing things against God's will, then war is something that can be done to stop them and defeat the enemies of God and stuff. So, we can't be pacifistic, where we are squeamish about blood and things like this either. But I'm certainly not going to show my 5-year-old because their brains have not even developed enough to handle that and process it, much less discuss it. So there is a lot of training that happens before I will ever show a movie like that. And it's based upon each kid. Some of my kids didn't see it till 16, 17, 18 years of age because they weren't ready for it. And so, but as a parent, I can see where the children are at and decide, okay, is this a time where they could see this or not? And I've never had a kid come and say that, oh, I've got nightmares from this, dad, or anything like that. Because I think that they were able to it was a timing of being able to process it and understand it. And it wasn't something where oh, I'm terrified of it, kind of idea. It was a teaching moment.
I'm listening to my husband here, and I want to answer something for Katie. Katie is privileged to have a husband next to her who is strong, has pretty strong opinions, I'm pretty sure. And I'm privileged to have that. I'm very aware of the fact that there's a lot of women, moms in the audience that don't have a husband who's either A, walking in Torah, or B, maybe even have a husband. They're having to do this alone as a single mom. But for those women who are married, let's just leave it at married. How much is dad involved in your kids' lives? If dad is involved, you're steps ahead in raising up a godly adult who will stay true to the word of God. Because Deuteronomy 6, the Shema, says, these commands shall be on your heart. And some of us are very blessed to have a husband who leads the family and gets deeply involved in these conversations, and these commands are on his heart. So my job is just to come along and support and keep encouraging. And yes, I have my children copy the Torah. They copy the entire Torah before they graduate high school. That's awesome. I've seen amazing miracles in our kids that now my older kids, we weren't walking in Torah back then, so they didn't do it, but they still have learned. They've been grounded in the scriptures. But I think having a strong marriage is probably the best thing we can give our kids to ensure that this is passed on. And if you don't have a strong marriage, you could at the very least not badmouth your former spouse. You could, build him up in the eyes of your children or your current spouse. Don't badmouth him, right? Build him up in the eyes of your children. Make him great in their eyes, even though behind closed doors, that he doesn't always pick up his socks off the floor or this or that, or he doesn't maybe provide for you or this or whatever. There's some beef you have against him. How can we build up the men in our generation to be maybe even make them sound a little better than they are so they have something to rise up to. My wife says I do this, I better do it. Instead of the bad mouthing and the complaining. But we need strong men, we need strong marriages. And I personally think, by looking and studying the Torah, the number one thing we can give our children to pass truth on to the next generation is a strong marriage. I think that it's beyond homeschooling or any other thing we do. Is if we're united and he's leading us. And by the way, wives, you could go to your local Sabbath fellowship and ask all kinds of questions, but 1 Corinthians 14 is really clear that if you have a question, the number one guy you're supposed to ask is this really smart guy you thought well enough to marry. So why don't you ask him some of your Bible questions?
I hope you weren't slumming when you got married,
hopefully you thought something.
If you thought highly enough to marry the guy,
handsome or something,
try to make him, don't make him. But try to lift him up so that he keeps that being that person you first
And he
married.
kind of might like it if you go, honey, what do you think about this Bible verse? I think you're smart. What do you think? And he's like, I have no idea, but she thinks I'm smart, so maybe I better.
Maybe I better find out so I can answer properly.
And that's what the Bible says we're supposed to do. And then our children go, wow, I have a really smart dad. Maybe I should ask him my question. And then hopefully, as they become adults and they get their own homes, they're like, hey, Dad, what do you think I should do in this situation? And the generations can continue. I hope we're answering your question, but that was just, he was waxing eloquent, and I'm like,
It's perfect.
That's not what I thought you were going to say, but it's awesome because it segues into another question about home dynamics and homeschooling. So you're saying that a strong marriage and things that's like one of the key things a child needs to become a healthy adult who is also still walking with Yah, and that helps. What about other home dynamics with homeschooling? What if you didn't start with your child like disciplining them perfectly until they were 3 and they're obedient and they're perfect? Maybe they're like more wayward and rebellious and you're like, we're going to homeschool now, and maybe your house doesn't have that order. Can you still homeschool? Is there hope for that kind of situation?
So then it goes back to, say, like you pulled your kids out of public school. They're awful. That maybe even in public school, you bring them home and you think everything was going well, and the first week you try to homeschooling, you find out your kid's this nightmare, and is rebellious and refuses to do any work. I want to say this because this has happened over and over again with families that we see. People have a clue how their kids behave in school half the time, and they get them home and all of a sudden they're rebellious, and I think sometimes people like pawn their kids off all day and don't have a clue how they act at all. And then they try, we're going to homeschool, and all of a sudden this child that they've raised that they didn't really have a clue how it's being raised, they have in their house 24/7, and it's a nightmare. So our number one thing that we talk about is that you're not going to go home and start teaching them homeschooling. You're not going to sit them down and start teaching them math, because this happens.
Priority.
This happens where they start to teach them math and the kid refuses to do it. Well, then you're not teaching math. Math isn't the problem you need. The problem you need is to teach them how to obey and to be respectful and to care about your family. So put away all the books, and your first 6 weeks, they're
6
schooling,
months, a year,
whatever it is, to get them to the point where they're sitting still, they're being respectful, they're willing to listen, they're going to learn. All those things have to happen anywhere before you're going to have any type of a good homeschooling situation. Mm-hmm. And so we'll just say, and by the way, the school districts typically, aren't going to come in and go, oh, you didn't teach math today? How dare you? There's parameters, and we can help too. If you're like, say a Homeschooling Torah member, and you're like, what do I do? My kids aren't doing this, and our state says we need to do this. We will help give you some ideas to how you can appease the state while you're trying to get your kids under control and get order back in to be able to homeschool properly and stuff. And far better to do that initially and to get all that behavior taken care of, and then go to homeschooling than to try and homeschool halfway and do the other halfway, or try to homeschool all the way and not try to train. Because we have people who are like, been doing this for 2 weeks and we're still in the same lesson. The kid refuses to do it, and we're telling them to sit there and they aren't doing any work. They're just soaking. And I'm like, you've got a lot more problems than homeschooling. It's
priorities.
Yes.
This is so interesting. This is the second time that you guys have said the bedrock. Maybe you haven't said it exactly like this, but the bedrock is discipline. If you don't have, because you said 0 to 3 years old, you're starting with that. Make sure that they obey. Obedience. No wonder the Torah matters. Obeying. Obedience is better than sacrifice.
That's the foundation. And it sounds like you're saying if that wasn't laid, then you just start there and you just start the sequence from wherever you are. The character, then the skills, and then the application. Even if your kid's older, you can't teach them other stuff if they don't have the character.
Correct. You wouldn't start in Algebra 1 if a child had never learned to add or subtract. You would have to go back. It doesn't matter how old they are. And by the way, older kids tend to learn things a lot faster. But it's also harder as a parent to establish authority if it's never been established. It's a mindset shift for the parent. The parent has to realize, whoa, my responsibility before our Creator is to be the parent. That's the job He gave me, and I've clearly dropped the ball. I have not been the parent. So we have to repent. We have to turn around. We have to go do it a new way. And that's honestly a harder mind shift for the parents than it is for the student.
Absolutely.
So.
Wow.
We've actually counseled parents in this situation, if their kids are horrible and they're older, to go and apologize to their children and say, we are sorry that we have not raised you right. And we apologize for this. We are going to do things different now. We're going to work to do them what God says to in His scriptures. And there's going to be some changes and priorities and boundaries and stuff. And that sets the parameters. Now you have to switch if you're going to do that. Because if you say all that and then you don't, then you're just adding another layer of bad teaching onto your children where they don't respect you, they don't care about what you say, and they say, oh, mom and dad are just lying again to us, or not.
Isn't it so interesting that like your kid can be going to school in these situations and you don't even really know that they aren't disciplined. You don't know that they won't listen. You don't know them nearly as well as you will if you begin to homeschool. That's what I'm hearing. That's cool. It's like better and worse.
It's like a couple that goes and works in 2 different jobs and comes home and they're there and then all of a sudden they're both home all day working together. And the dynamic even of the couple changes because they don't realize they don't know each other as much as they thought, and that of course happened a great deal in COVID, but
True.
And all these people came out of COVID depressed because they had to spend time with each other and their family.
Who is this person?
My kids are driving me crazy. My husband's driving me crazy. No. That's so funny.
Okay. We missed oh man, I have 2 questions. I want to get to results and that sort of thing, but I also would like what I'm hearing about. It sounds like homeschooling Torah is not just curriculum. Can you tell us what it is you do? I mean, are you consulting with everyone? How's this work?
Can I say something? I meant to go back to your previous question real quick. There's something I really wanted to say.
Sure.
And it goes with what you said. So yes, so the foundation, like 0 to 3, is behavior training. Then from that point on is skills training. And then eventually it's independent, or what I like the better word, interdependence training, where you're teaching them to be able to do things on their own, but they're not like, I don't like independence because independence makes it sound like they don't need you anymore. And I feel like we want to create an interdependence, whereas an adult or as a teenager, they're getting close to being like a friend almost. You're not friendship. You're still the parent, but you're being able to carry on conversations as an adult with your teenage child and get good things back. But the 0 to 3 is your behavior, is your foundation. From that point on is skills training. So the example, Anne kind of mentioned it, like Will in our homeschooling curriculum, we push very heavy to do things like flashcards, like your multiplication tables and stuff like that. And you would be amazed at how many parents fight us on that and say, "Oh, I don't like doing it," or "Johnny doesn't like doing it." I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't
Johnny
care.
doesn't like doing
You know?
flashcards, so I can't do them with them. I'm like, who cares
Teaching
if he
them
likes it?
the states and capitals, and they have to memorize all the states and capitals and spell them correctly in a test format. Those kind of things, because if you do those, then when they go on to algebra, you would be amazed at how much faster algebra is. If I know all my multiplication tables by heart, I'm not sitting there having to multiply every single, or add or subtract every single digit, which is so slow and makes algebra seem so tedious that I will never get it done. But if you have those basic skills down, and it's extremely speeds up the process of the older stuff. So again, goes into the whole idea of training for adulthood. Those skills may not seem like adulthood stuff, but they're training for when you get to adulthood classes. You're not training them to learn how to do basic algebra and addition and subtraction. You're training them so they can go into calculus and physics and stuff like this. And the way I do that at 6 is I'm saying, no, you're going to start learning your addition and subtraction table. You're going to learn how to write your letters properly. You're going to learn maybe how to do cursive, because the science says that when kids learn how to do cursive, it increases brain activity and function.
Rabbit hole.
I know, I'm sorry. But
This is important.
but I'm just saying, all those things are not to train a child to be a child. They're training a child so that when they get to adulthood, they have all the skills necessary to be a fantastic adult that Yah wants them to be.
So his question was, do we sit and consult with these parents all the time because they didn't have these skills, and maybe they pulled their child out at 5th grade and they don't, how do we deal with that at Homeschooling Torah? And that's a challenge.
I would say, let's put it this way. Yes, we try to help parents a lot, but there's only so much time in a day, and it's impossible to sit there and have one-on-ones with, I think we have, how many families now?
500 or so, so
total families that we connect with through Homeschooling Torah.
Can't. Plus all the ones that just email us with questions because they might have watched a video or something and have questions.
Then describe Homeschooling Torah then for us real quick. Like, give us a breakdown. What is this thing? Is it just curriculum, or what is it? Give us the breakdown.
So, no, it's not just curriculum, but it is curriculum from preschool through 12th grade, except for the advanced maths. We have not written all of the advanced high school math yet. Someday maybe. But we have everything else for all the subjects from preschool through 12th grade. And we have basically Homeschooling Torah is a membership site where you can think of it as a Chinese restaurant, and you walk like a buffet, and you walk in, and over here's your preschool curriculum, and over here's your math, and over here's your science and language arts, and we have chores, we have speech class, we have online classes for high school students, and we have all of these things.
PE classes,
PE, music,
menus for every week.
But no, it's no, you can't use all of it, because just like a Chinese restaurant, you'd be stuffed and engorged, and you cannot try to do all the subjects every year with your students. So we try to help our customers choose which ones would be a good baseline for them to start with, and then they can always add dessert as they go, because there's a lot on the site. And then secondly, we also include ebooks on parenting, marriage, how to set up a system of chores, how to organize your kitchen, how to
organize your homeschooling day.
Yeah, what do you do when mom is tired? We have a section on that, like for just helping moms that are overwhelmed with life. So we try to do a lot of discipleship, and honestly, I think that's the passion of where we'd like to go over the next few years, is how do we really equip families. We'd like to even back up a little bit and maybe start with moms who are pregnant and expecting a baby, and how do you begin with an infant, and how do you set a good foundation in your home? Those are things that don't exist yet. So, if you know anything about Homeschooling Torah, the speed of how fast we get out all of our ideas is usually slower than what we want it to be.
Is the curriculum just books, or is it videos, or all of the above, or what is this?
No, it is online in the membership. They are PDFs that you download, and we encourage the moms to print them out so they become a printed book that you can touch and feel.
So in essence, you can make it into a book.
Yeah, it becomes a book. But the curriculum is mostly written to the parents because it's not our job to teach your children. It's the parents' job to teach the children that the Father gave them. So our job is to come and equip the parents. Hey, this is a discussion. You could read these pages in this history book, and here are some questions that you could discuss with your kids. Here are some scripture verses that you could include, and here are some assignments that the high school students could go off and do. And by the way, here's something the little ones could do. But our job is to talk to the parents. So we do not. Overall, our goal is not to create bunches of worksheets with busy work for children to keep them occupied, but mostly to talk to the parents and equip and train them. That's what we see is we really want to not take over the schooling from them and take that responsibility off their plate, but to help them make it possible for them to lead their family.
So like we're not the kind of place where like you can sit your kids down at the table, slap books in front of them, and go do whatever you want to do while they're doing school all day. We want the parents to be interactive with the kids and to be the ones who are the teachers in their lives.
But we also give you menus. So you got like a menu for every single week, or here's a grocery list, and here's how you could maybe manage chores and stuff, because we realize that talking and spending time with your children takes time away from the mom. She might have a homestead or a business, or, a lot of people are working several jobs. And so we also try to think of, okay, how can we do this efficiently so that the parents can also manage their life? Because that's reality.
I love how holistic the whole thing is and how many resources that you guys have for parents. And do you need to be a stay-at-home mom to homeschool?
No.
We've had and probably still do parents either both work or some work.
We have many parents who both work.
I mean, we both work. Yes. And yes. So, and I'm sure you guys understand that too. Even though we're at home, we're both working, and we can't just sit and do homeschool all day.
Wish.
So sometimes we tag team it a little bit, and some do some parts and some do others. Sometimes we're just waiting for the kids, and we do certain subjects together, and then the rest of it is the independent study. You have to pick and choose
a little bit, and it's harder because you want to do more. But we have advice on the site on how to. He always had a saying that he used to say, and I'm not going to say it right, but basically, don't expect what you will inspect, and don't expect what you will inspect. So if you are, say, a mom who has to work a part-time job, or maybe you and your husband are working different shifts so that you can make this work, or just there's a lot of variety. You also have to be sure that you inspect your children's work. You're going to have to assign more of it to be done independently, but you still have the responsibility to go back sometime and make sure that it got done and that you're keeping up to it. So we do have ways you can modify the curriculum, but...
On that note, just as a perfect example of how we were imperfect, we had children when they were in elementary school, and we give them their math work and help them get going on it. And one of our kids was pretty smart and able to catch things on pretty quick. And so he would get his math done and really quick and everything like that.
He's so fast. He's so smart.
And so this went on, and we just, trusted him and everything like that. He had shown us otherwise. Then one day, my Anne decided to look at his work and see what happened, only to realize that he wasn't doing all of his work and had been for several weeks only doing a few problems and stuff. And Mom expected something but didn't inspect something and found that out. Well, now we can deal with the problem, and we dealt with it.
And Dad at work, and Dad came home, and then we made him do all of it. But,
back again.
But
so he learned.
We hadn't looked.
There was both a physical consequence and a mental consequence that happened there.
He had to do math for like days. He couldn't play. But still, it was our fault because we didn't check. And that's why, for working moms, that's especially tempting. You're really busy.
Yeah. So on that note, I can go something in my own personal life that's, to kind of show how my parents raised myself. When in fourth grade, I was always the kid. I was never a disrespectful kid, but I was usually loud and we could get silly pretty easy and stuff. So when I was in fourth grade, they instituted a new system at school where, like, if you were caught, you were not doing what you're supposed to, and the teacher called on you, then you got a check mark on the board, and that was just a warning. And then if it happened again, you got a second check mark on the board, and that was usually you got a letter written home to your parents. And then if you got a third warning, then you went to the principal's office. So I remember that after this one time in class, I got a second check mark. It must have been a Friday. So my teacher sent a letter home with me, and I had to go and give it to my parents. Now, number one, I could have lost all that, and kids do this all the time from their parents because they don't respect their parents. But I respected my parents enough to do that. Took it home. Parents saw it. Okay, everything that you thought you were going to do fun that weekend is now off the table, and instead I had to write 5,000 sentences. I will not misbehave in school or something along that lines. And then I had to do like extra chores all weekend. And then and they had, because they sent home a paper and the parent had to sign the paper that they saw it and understood what was happening. And then I had to go back to my teacher on Monday, give her that, and apologize to her. So that's, consequences. I didn't get a spanking, so maybe if I was younger, I probably would have gotten a spanking, but I didn't get a spanking this time because that wasn't the consequence that I would have learned the most from. So consequences change and are morphed based upon the situation. But I never wanted to misbehave in school again and get any more check marks because that was difficult. But if I don't respect my parents enough at that point in time, I could have just said, no, I'm not going to do it. How are they going to make me write sentences? And I see this in a lot of kids. And parents just go, fine, No, that's why you teach the basics at the little kids. The respect should be there by 3, so that, by 9 or 7 or 8, if I say something's going to happen, my kids will do it because they respect me and accept the consequences of their behavior.
Results is my next question. What are the results of these children's education? We don't have to just go with your children, but how about the children who go to homeschoolingtorah.com? Are they cretins? Do they know what they're doing? What are the results?
They get into college. They pass their tests, their ACTs and SATs, because they can reason. I think sometimes maybe we don't cover exactly the same material as public schools, but the ability, what they check at college level is, can you think? Can you reason? They know how to write. They know, we have a speech class. It's like one of my favorite parts of Homeschooling Torah. It's not just speech. We teach literature, grammar, writing, and speech to high school students once a week on Zoom. And these kids are bright. They can argue the best arguments in a persuasive speech. We've heard it all. And they can write papers. We have students that are wanting to write novels and start companies with good literature that is, really uplifting, but still well written, doggone it. And, something you'd actually want to read. We have kids that want to go into archaeology. We have students that want to become scientists. We have students that want to get involved in rescue efforts, such as like Bear Independent, that are not afraid to tackle the biggest mountain and get out there and get dirty. We have a lot of girls saying, I just want to be a wife and mom, but these girls are equipped on how to cook.
I just wanted to say that I thought of this earlier, that to say this to girls, that today it's looked down upon to be a stay-at-home mom, but you actually have the greatest responsibility because you're training up the next generation. Hopefully it's a tag team, and yes, the dad still isn't heavily involved, but the mom is probably going to give the majority of the responsibility of making sure everything's going on at home okay, just like it was in our house for a majority of our kids growing up years. And that's the greatest responsibility there is, because you're training the next astronauts and
Yeah.
and engineers and all,
Whatever.
and preachers and
Yeah.
and
I see
Torah
Torah
keepers.
teenagers. Torah teenagers are awesome. I see them as being very driven, not afraid to take on extremely difficult tasks, and they want to change the world, and they are well spoken. They've heard their parents arguing Torah for 10, 15 years. They can carry themselves in an argument well. And I'm seeing a lot of them on their own initiative making fellowship groups online, across the world, and getting together and discussing hard things like calendars and the name and all of these issues, but doing it in a respectful and gracious way with each other. And I'm seeing them want to start their own businesses. Entrepreneurship is huge right now among Torah teenagers, which is extremely exciting. And they don't want to just grow up, get a business degree, work at the local corporation, but they're like, we could start the corporations. We could, and I feel like the next generation is so full of promise.
That is awesome.
So encouraging.
It sounded like earlier in your story that you were going and meeting these groups, or at least wherever there was a hot spot of people. Is there a way to connect all these kids, or are you already doing that? How can this happen?
That's a good question. We have a group, Discord.
Yeah, we have a Discord group.
A Discord group for homeschooling Torah members where we try to connect a lot of those through that way.
The teenagers talk a lot more than the parents do.
Yes. But we allow the parents to come on so that the parents, so to make sure that it's
moderators
what they want, and we aren't trying to hide anything or stuff like that. But yeah, there are groups out there, and
Again, I feel like a lot of them are being initiated by the teenagers themselves. We are very, very busy, so sometimes we're not the best at putting those groups together ourselves. Just way too much on our plate, but that is so exciting to see them leading that up. And there are groups that aren't even associated with Homeschooling Torah that are teenagers and young adults, our own children, are involved in. And so, yeah, we could help connect people. But I think it's going to just continue to grow because they're taking the initiative already. Yeah. I see that all over the place.
I don't want to shift gears here, but I do want to make sure we talk about anything else you guys want to plug.
Oh, yes. So we have another website, which I kind of do a bit more with. We're trying to grow it, called torahhome.com. And the idea behind it is to try and get into these various things. It's not I probably am not doing a good business model where I have my little niche or something, but it deals with a lot of these same discipleship kind of concepts, with parenting and home and things. And I'm kind of a weird bird in the fact that I like interior design. So I like talking about how to decorate your house and stuff like that. And so I enjoy doing that DIY stuff to help, do that. I think we should have beautiful homes. I mean, I don't think we should have, trashy homes or unkept homes. I mean, if neat homes for sure. And I think beautiful homes, I don't think there's anything wrong with having beautiful things. I don't think the Bible says, if you're, I like beautiful things, you're evil, kind of an idea. And so I want to promote that and wise business decisions with your money, how it's, parenting, marriage, all these kind of things, gardening, homesteading, all these things that are key things. And I'm learning them too, woodworking. Hopefully, we were trying to get into blacksmithing a little bit and stuff we did a little bit with one of our daughters, wanted to learn that. Kind of idea, all these different things, and I'm learning all this stuff because I didn't grow up with a lot of it myself. So it's kind of just a process of learning these things. Right now, we're remodeling our house because we're bringing my mother-in-law in to live with us, and the room that we have as our room is we're moving upstairs, but the upstairs room doesn't have any closets. So we're building closets in, and then we're redoing our room for her so it fits her needs and stuff. I've never remodeled the house, so this is all, new stuff. And how does that work? And I'm wanting to take pictures and maybe do some video and do blog posts and things, but to help people and to create a community that way. And then I'm also a graphic designer, so I design shirts and stuff like that and logos and things. So I'm trying to use that as another way to support us and help with the different things
the
too.
Message of Torah out.
Yeah.
Unique shirts that someone's going to say, "What's that? What's that about?"
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be. My tag is supposed to be kind of like "Wear Your Faith." It's kind of idea.
So.
Beautiful. Okay, so is there anything else you would like to add to any homeschoolers out there?
I'd say keep it up, be consistent, continue to build that foundation, and really work on skills. Because even if it doesn't look like you're making any success, you just keep working at it. And then when your kids become young adults, late teens, they go off and do things, all of a sudden they will surprise you with all the things that they are capable of doing or the things that they will learn on their own. I know that with our first couple kids that went off, we were like, I remember feeling like, okay, we didn't do enough. We failed. We've missed all this stuff, and they don't know everything I want them to know, and all these kind of things like this. And they're not there. I didn't teach them everything they probably were supposed to learn, okay. And then they would surprise me with how many skills they would teach themselves and things that they would learn on their own. That
now we call them up. How do you do that?
Yeah. So now, yeah, and so they've learned all these skills that they now are helping us with in certain ways. Our oldest son comes and deals with all of our IT problems because he taught himself all that, and he didn't go off to college to learn it, and now he helps us. And
we have an electrician as a son, and we have a son-in-law who is in construction and is such a help, and a daughter who wants to be a blogger and a writer, and we have another daughter who's a business major at college and doing well, and hopefully she'll pass on some of that knowledge to us, and so on.
Well, Anne, anything you want to add to the homeschool families out there?
Keep your priorities right. Make the Bible the foundation of everything you do. That's why it is your foundation, and keep your priorities right. It's more important to have a good marriage and a happy home than it is to have brilliant children. And don't care what the world thinks. Stop caring. Don't look at them. Just get off Facebook and read your Bible.
And teach your kids.
Yes, I'm going to add one thing too, a plug for you guys. You didn't mention this, but you do this amazing online conference. You've done it several times on your YouTube channel with these crazy, wonderful webinars about how to teach my kid math. Like, I have special needs questions. I have, how do I respect my husband? You have all kinds of topics to do with homeschooling, parenting, just how to be a good teacher, how children learn, and like nitty gritty granular things. I'm going to try to link that in the description so people can find just these things that you put out there on YouTube for free that have been so helpful, and I've learned a lot from them. So everyone should check those out.
Yes, we'll link those, and we'll link anything else.
One more, I was going to say, slowsabbathfellowship.com, and then we have a YouTube channel where we do record all of our services and teachings and then have them on. Usually it's a week behind the Torah portion kind of thing. So, but you can go on there and look at those too. We've been doing that now for
a long time.
Yeah, quite a few years.
I'd really like to someday take all the stuff this smart guy says and get it in a book. That's another goal of mine.
Beautiful. We'll link it all below in the description so people can find all this stuff, peruse all of the things that you guys are doing. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This has been a blast.
Thank you.
It's wild when there's 4 of us on here, but it's great.
So thought-provoking.
I created a Patreon so I could kind of help support this thing. But what it has morphed into is a incredibly fun once a month digital gathering where we all the patrons and I get together and talk about the Torah, talk about our lives, talk about questions we might have, problems we're running into. And so if that sounds like something you are interested in, or if you just want to support the podcast, then join our Patreon. It's patreon.com/thelifewithluke. Thank you so much for watching.